Hello guys, welcome to a new edition of React Today as part of the World's Wide project. Where to start? Where to end? There's no end, there's always a beginning. I cannot begin this program today without saying that Israel keeps on doing what they know best, and that since October the 7th is nothing but genocide. The war between the special operation between Russia and Ukrainians are getting deep and deep for many good reasons. The Americans are supporting with NATO incursions in the Russian territory with Kursk. For example, this is not the first time Kursk is trying to be invaded. It's kind of a reminiscence of the Kursk war in the Second World War. It's one of the most tougher warfare ever mentioned after Stalingrad. Kursk was one of the main places where the forces found each other, antagonistic forces found each other, and they started, of course, to annihilate themselves. So it's not the first time that Kursk is a historical place for battle. Neither is the first time that Russia wants to be invaded through the Ukrainian territory. Napoleon, the Russians, etc. The fact is that why was the purpose of this operation against Kursk? It was a distraction using mercenaries from Central South America, British, whomever, prisoners, etc., as has been specified by different media outlets that are responsible, we suppose, with the media. So since we don't have in the Western world the capacity to hear from them, I'm talking about Russian points of view, because it's being censored, especially here in Canada with Bill C-11, Bill C-18, and now Bill 63. We talked a little bit about it in the last program. Well, things are getting tougher here in Canada in order for you to express your opinion, informed opinion. People that speak stupidly without arguments, whose only choice for argument is to fight you, insult you, and go against you, well, that demonstrates how ignorant they are. But it's okay, they're always been that ignorant. As long as they support the government will support them first, as has been proven by since October the 7th, but since the pandemic, more than ever before. October the 7th is just the 9/11 for the Israelis, which means corruption, lies, the impossibility that is growing. We are smarter than anybody else. We don't care about proof. We don't care about the independence of the Venezuelan constitution and the separation of powers. Yeah, it's all a mafia with Venezuela. Yeah, sure. Well, prove it, because the Venezuelan government is showing up the acts, the forms. Let's say they call it actas, okay, which is the forms where the voters sign their information in order to vote. It's supposed to be secret in order for the juries and people to count the votes. And the system, that electronic system that they use, is not the regular one that like we bent, and you have to identify yourself. There's recognition of yourself, electronic recognition of yourself, so to minimize the fraud. Even though we know that any system can be hacked and altered. We saw that in The Simpsons. So if The Simpsons said it, as you saw in two editions before, you have to believe it if The Simpsons said it, because apparently they are prophesying everything that we need to know somehow. The point is that when the Venezuelan Electoral Council says this is the proof that we have, and the other parties that participated in the elections are showing proof, well, they're not. All of a sudden, they don't show up, and all of a sudden, even though they're claiming that they won by an exponential difference, 87 to 4, or something like that, they haven't proved that. And they demand from the government, like the G7 and the United States of America and all these people, in order to say, okay, guys, we don't care what the government says. We don't care what institutions say in Venezuela. We want a change of government. I agree with that. I agree with the fact that Mr. Maduro should leave office as soon as possible, no doubt. I agree that Mr. Maduro has taken the government for way too long, and that it will be good for Venezuelan people to have a change in the head of government. Absolutely. The problem comes when it is Corina Machado and Eusebio who's coming to take over the wealth of the Venezuelans. There is such thing as informed opinion, and there's such thing as misinformed, disinformed, malinformed opinion, and you can check which is yours. If you follow this program, you will understand that there's always proof, and I always put in the credits at the end of the program the sources where I get my information, so that you can confirm that what I'm saying is an informed opinion. But more than opinion is the necessity of the people to understand here in Canada that we're falling in the hands of governments that don't represent the peoples around the world. We have talked about that for the last 7 months, especially 10 months now, after 7th of October 2023. So when we see what's going on, and that they trying to get a few miles away from the border inside Russia to Kursk in order to get the Ukrainian close to Kursk, there's a nuclear plant. So they're saying that they want to get the nuclear plant. Okay, but in the meantime, there's other places where there's a lot of gas that is flowing through Ukraine in order to feed European communities, European countries from the cheap Russian gas that Europe have depended on for decades, especially after 1967 and the end of the Cold War. But since the United States blew up Nord Stream 2 and it keeps sabotaging everything that Russia does, now it has, according to NATO, and that's what Russian government is saying, is that NATO is behind this, behind the Ukrainian attack, because as ambivalent as Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky is, like, we want to sign a peace, we are considering a peace treaty, but all of a sudden, no, there's attacks in Kursk, they incursionated, the incursion of the soldiers, many of them mercenaries and prisoners, with a good strategy when it comes to a surprise attack, but a very stupid move when it comes to long time interference on war times, especially crossing the border. It was used as a distraction in order for the Ukrainians and the mercenaries to take the gas terminals, where you can just count how many cubic feet of gas are going to cross. We're talking about billions and well, yearly billions of metric cubic meters of gas to the European Union that has to go through Ukraine. So what they're trying to do is to close the bulb of the gas that comes from Russia through Ukraine in order to stop the Russians, to keep feeding the European Union. Who came with this idea? Was this idea from the United States? Very probably, in order for Ukraine to say and to stay in government a little longer. Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky would have approved this idea that let's go incursion into Kursk and get the atomic plant, energy plant, if possible. And if we can't, well, the main objective is to control the pipeline, the gas operations that feed the European communities of cheap gas from Russia. Again, since Nord Stream 2 was blown by the Americans in cooperation with some others, and there's no independent investigation about this, we, the people of the world, have to pay higher prices of gas because the investigation never took place, even though Russia was not included, and Russia called for an independent investigation, so did the United Nations, which is of course, a useless body, just like the Organization of American States in South America, in order to control the will and the whim and caprice of the non-elected, like van der Leyen and many other European committees that do not represent the people, that people have not voted for them, like is the European Commission, von der Leyen again, and her friends, saying that we have to go to war no matter what and pay higher prices of gas because now the source of gas, the valve that's going to open the gas for Europeans is going to be the liquid gas that will come for American refineries or at the ports that have adaptations for the liquid gas refineries in order to bring Europeans 3 times, 4 times, if not more, gas prices to the Europeans' economy, even though the European economy is going down big time by supporting the American initiatives and by being sold out to the American and subservience to the American. I never seen Europe so humiliated. I mean, the people of Europe, the European Commission, and all these bureaucratic people that don't represent the countries but make decisions without our permission there in Europe, here in Canada, and in the United States, demands a revolutionary act, demands a revolutionary behavior, and that's what I have told you for years, that the wars for independence are back. The wars for independence are back in the European Union, in the UK, here in Canada, there in the United States, especially with Kamala Harris, which is the new Democratic Party face for another lying concept of what America should be, which as long as it's bought off by the Jewish state, America is not the United States of America, but since 1945 it has become the United States of Israel. I will not change my mind unless a public of American people elect another president. But you have to understand that there's no president in the United States that can be elected or elect on November that is not pro-Jewish. The lens of the pro-Jews is astonishingly a Jew that we don't know how she's going to react if she became president. And I hope, again, I said, like I said in my last program, that the American people wake up enough to vote for Jill Stein instead of any of the other candidates, and I'm including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I'm including Bill Clinton. I'm sorry, I used to say not Bill Clinton, but his opposite, which is nothing but the same, with a different view, egoistical dude, even worse than Bill, only it has a better wife, I guess, which is Donald J. Trump. But between Clinton and Trump, there's a lot of, in my opinion, in my humble studies of politics, it's that there are more things in common between Bill Clinton and Donald J. Trump than Hillary and Donald. So what do we have left if not Jill Stein? Because Robert F. Kennedy is not going to happen. And, well, Kamala Harris, for Christ's sake. We already know her history. I have to make a note on her specifically regarding Mrs. Kamala Bad Karma Harris. I mean, for Americans and the rest of the world, as long as anybody in the world supports the genocidal government of Israel, the future of the world, the country, and us is very grim, dude. Yes. If you're going to support a government like this, I'm not with you. And if you're with me, please subscribe to the channel and make your comments below. Just be respectful. If you're going to hate and do something, sure. But yeah, you're not welcome here. This channel is only for people that can criticize with arguments, not with insults and violence. Alright, so why don't we go to the news today and find out what's going on? Let's find out. And let's go here. Canadian for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Okay. Words will not stop Israel's relentless drive to annihilate all life in Gaza. You know that Israel is not and will not uphold international law. We need you to put full sanctions on Israel, impose a two-way arms embargo, and support ICC arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. And that's from Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Again, that is from Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Wars will not stop Israel's relentless drive to annihilate life in Gaza. You know that Israel is not and will not uphold international law. We need you to put full sanctions on Israel, impose a two-way arms embargo, and support ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, arrest warrants against Israel leaders. And let's hear what Melanie Joly says. Half Canada condemns the Israeli strike that killed Palestinian civilians sheltering at a school in Gaza, including children. Israel must uphold international humanitarian law. Hamas must stop putting civilian lives in danger. So it's the Palestinians and it's only Hamas who is committing the atrocities. It's not Israel by killing in a school more than 90 people. And Melanie Joly says, an immediate ceasefire is desperately needed alongside the release of hostages. That's what she said. And that is according to Melanie Joly after Canadian for Justice and Peace in the Middle East spoke what I said. Now, a joint letter by Canadian doctors who worked in Gaza demand arms embargo immediately. And I quote, now, over 300 days into the relentless Israeli military assaults on hospitals, over 500 healthcare workers have been killed, including 63 physicians. Hundreds of healthcare workers have been detained and subjected to torture. The Israeli attacks have made this the deadliest place in history for aid workers, and this is a joint letter by Canadian doctors to the United Nations and to the Government of Canada. But let's check. Canada for Justice, Peace in the Middle East. Canada finally speaks out on Israel's systemic torture and sexual assault on Palestinian detainees, but calling for an international investigation is not enough. The evidence shows that Israel torture camps are a state policy to start with, and to start, sanction Ben Gvir and refer Israel to the International Criminal Court. Foreign Policy Canada says that Health Canada is deeply concerned by reports on the torture and abuse of Palestinian detainees in Israel prisons, including sexual violence. Such treatment is never justifiable in any context, said Foreign Policy Canada. Foreign Policy Canada also adds that we expect a thorough investigation into these troubling allegations and any perpetrators to be held accountable. But what Canada doesn't tell you here, fellow Canadians, Americans, Europeans, New Zealanders, and Australians, and UKs, is that they don't care because they haven't stopped relations with a genocidal country. They're just asking for them to control themselves and to exercise measurement. Measurement on what? On keep killing? Just yesterday, like I said, they keep on killing people, and Canada keeps being accomplice on this matter. But let's take a look on this one. Canada has $94.5 million inactive permits for weapons to Israel that could ship by late 2025. Again, let me hear this well, you Canadians. Canada has 94.5 million in active permits for weapons to Israel that could ship by late 2025. But let's take a look at the numbers. That's as much as the last 4 years combined. Cancel the permits arms embargo now. Canada has 94.5 million in active permits for weapons to Israel that could ship by late 2025, and that's as much as the last 4 years combined. Okay, let's check the numbers then. And the numbers are okay, let me see if I can get them. Canada has $100 million invested, $80 million, that is $30.6 million for 2023. $60 million, okay, let's begin. In 2020, 18.9 million for Israel. Okay, in 2021, 26 million. That became $40 million by the time, and that is 2021. By 2022, they supposed to have $20.3 million in permits for weapons to Israel that could ship by late 2025, that added up to 60 million. And in 2023, it promised $30.6 million Canada permits for weapons to Israel that could be cheap by late 2025. 80 million for 2023, and now it's $100 million. So almost is, again, Canada has $94.5 million in active permits for weapons to Israel that could ship by late 2025. So despite Canada's pause on the approval of new military exports to Israel, the Maple has revealed that Canadian manufacturers still hold 95 million in active permits for weapons that could ship to Israel by the end of 2025. That's almost as much as the last 4 years combined. Canada has acknowledged that the arms exports represent a possible threat to human rights, and Parliament voted to stop transferring military goods to Israel. So why are they allowing a record-breaking amount of military exports to continue? Canada must cancel these permits and enforce a full two-way embargo on genocide. So, as you can see, the hypocrisy of our government is as much as the hypocrisy of the Americans, and in way, in concordance, it concurred with the Israeli plans for Gaza, for Lebanon, and for anybody that opposed them, including here in Canada, as we have seen with institutions and universities as we march against the policy of Canada supporting Israel as a foreign nation. And I show, of course, Abby Martin's for you on the last video, Abby Martin's video when she was, and she won the legal fight, I have to tell you, with Georgia. Abby Martin won the fight against Georgia. But we have to understand that there's more than 25, I believe it's 28 now, it can be more, that are against citizens that say, hey, you are committing genocide. I don't agree. It's not only that the Jews, like the girls and the peoples in the show, like for example, I stopped watching before October the 7th, for the knowledge I have and the books I have read. I have stopped watching shows that I used to like from the 90s, I guess. Well, the 90s was not the best decade for me, but it was a good decade. And there was very shows that Hollywood, of course, promoted, like Seinfeld and Nana Fine, the nanny, which were funny shows. I used to watch them when I had the time in the 90s. But the more I read and the more I instructed myself about how Hollywood is also a branch of the Jewish state, literally, in America for more than 100 years, the more I started to watch those shows. And now, after October the 7th, I have canceled those shows whatsoever. I can't resist watching this hypocrisy and this artist. Of course, we have to watch other shows contemporary time right now. An artist, more than 1,000 that signed for Israel. I'm sorry, but Hollywood, I'm losing my faith in your capacity to perform any decency when it comes to history and truth. The other thing I wanted to mention is that many books and many authors in the United States and here in Canada, I'm talking about history books that speak about the black history, the traumatism that the colonialism and the cotton industry brought to America, and the slavery and the people that run from slavery from the United States looking for a better world in Canada found themselves in dire straits too, because of this policy of the Anglican and the Catholic Church in order to impose, not even seduce, but impose against the First Nations any consideration when it comes to their beliefs, religion, language, and culture, and impose the Christian culture that Jesus is the only way home, and after you die, that's Jesus, and if you don't believe it, we take you, we separate you from your families. There are residential schools for more than 150 years here in Canada, and in many occasions, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau have failed to appear on such important celebrations for the First Nations. It's not new. So when you see that the books are being retired from the shelves, when they're speaking about such important history, which is to understand where we come from, what other races have lived here, because there's going to be obviously a question. Let's say your grandkid is going to ask his father, "Hey, what is those black people? Where the black people came from, and where are the Chinese here? What does it mean?" Okay. If there's not enough books of history to say that this is a multicultural world and a multipolar world that has been taken over by racism, by economy, by the power of belligerence and violence, if people don't know that, they will never know what was their past. And these people I'm talking about, according to Yuval Noah Harari, is not going to be us. It's going to be some machine that exists instead of God, that of course is going to disregard history, because humanity will have never existed and will never exist and have never existed. That will be a chapter that is going to be in the dark for the new generations after 2030, if was possible by Yuval Noah Harari to do so. But he helps with a little help of his friends, from his friends, like Bill Gates, like the World Economic Forum, and the people that believe and think like him, and the cowards that don't have the guts to say, "Hey, we need a better world," that we know who they are in the news, in the media, etc. Well, they all help for this world not to be accountable for now. So the wars for independence are back, and when I say the wars for independence, I hope that it can be peacefully. But as long as the police keep treating their own citizens like enemies, because that's the doctrine of the enemy within, that John F. Kennedy, with the help of the English, but especially with Marxism, in the beginning of the 20th century with the FBI and the famous leader of the FBI for more than 40 years, Mr. J. Edgar Hoover, have educated the countries in Central and South America, and have educated the countries where their elites have worked for the Jewish American system after the First World War. And the importance of the Zionist movement, that we need to understand that it's thousands of years in the making, especially when they, I would say, since Moses' times begun, because the calf is Wall Street. The calf of Moses is nowadays Wall Street. The calf of Moses nowadays is the military industrial complex. The calf of Moses nowadays is the Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, JJ. The calf of Moses right now is Elon Musk. It's all these geniuses of communications like Zuckerberg, all Jews, and Zionists, and Google. So do we need an independent Canada? Yes, we do. Do we need an independent America? Yes, we do. Do you think that is justifiable, like Mrs. Jolie, Melanie Jolie says that it's all right, and a lip service to Canadians? The same with Mrs. This person that is so painful to hear all the time, Chrystia Freeland, and the Prime Minister itself and his cabinet, and the Liberal Party, no different than the Conservative Party that is supposed to win the next elections. I hope it doesn't. I'm running for Prime Minister. Vote for me, and I will change a lot of things for Canada, and I will, of course, contribute to the development of this civilization. Evolving economy is my proposal in order to accomplish that. And if you vote for me, we can make some changes in Canada, as we can make them if you vote for the Green Party. I think is the only option down there in America. And if we follow common sense and we follow truth, because truth has become the public enemy number one. Information. So let's get back to some numbers and some other issues that I wanted to mention to you. America's wars. We have to understand that as long as America is guided by Israel, I don't know if you have noticed, but I think that more than 500,000 Israelis have moved from Israel to America, to Canada, and to Europe. But guess what? Once the moment of this crazy prime minister ends, and nobody knows when, but pretty soon, whether by violence and the escalation of war or full war, they're going to come back to Israel, and they will be citizens, and they're going to keep on saying, keep raping Palestinians, keep raping Canadians, Whoever opposes us, shh, don't say a word. That they're beautiful people that wanted to help others. No, they're against us, Israel. So we have to take them in silence and disappear them, take them to our jails and torture them to shut up, re-educate them so they can become our believers, so that they can believe what we believe, that we are the only people that have ground in the world. In other words, this world is ours, and whoever opposes us, British, Canadian, beautiful people around the world, whether blacks, whether Nigerians, whether South Americans, Central Americans, indigenous people, we're gonna take over. And if we don't take over, we use the Samson plan and we'll take the world with us. But you're gonna do as we say, or else we're gonna kill you, disappear you, interfere your universities, fire your presidents, and shut you up with Google, with Facebook, with YouTube. We all have you already, and your governments support us, so shut up. I don't think so, dude. This is a time for a revolution. The wars for independence are back. And we're going to call about what is the story about behind this, because we need to talk about this whether we like it or not. Canadians, Americans, Europeans, New Zealanders, and Australians. UK's. America's war, according to the Department of Veteran Affairs. This is not me inventing such stuff. You can find it yourself. American Revolution 1775, total U.S. service members 270,000. Battle deaths 4,435 battle deaths. Non-mortal wounds 6,085. We can go to the War of 1812. Total U.S. service is important because included Canadian forces. War of 1812 to 1815, total United States service members 286,730 people dead participated. Battle deaths 2,260 and non-mortal wounded 4,500. And we're going to see how it escalates. The Civil War 1861 to 1865, total United States service members, that means Union, 2,213,363. Battle deaths of the Union, 140,414. You see how it escalates from war to war? Okay. Other deaths in the Theater Union, 224,097, etc. Battle deaths from the Confederate side, 74,524. Other deaths, 59,297 deaths on the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. I can carry on. Let's go to Spanish-American War from 1899 to 1902. Total United States servicemen worldwide 306,760. Okay. Battle deaths, they say 385. I don't agree with that numbers. Other deaths in service, but this is according to the Department of Veteran Affairs. World War I. This is one important one because Canada participated in it, as many other countries, but Canada, along with the United States, the Devil's Brigade, and there's much to talk about it. It was true. It was created. World War I, 1917, 1918, to begin with. Total United States service members. This is regarding to the First World War. You remember that the First World War didn't begin in 1917. This is speaking about when America interfered or participated in the First World War, which was from 1917 to 1918. The First World War began in 1914, as we remember well. The total United States servicemen worldwide was 4,734,991. Battle deaths, 53,402. Other deaths in service, 63,184. The lost generation, you remember that? Not only Americans. The Americans participated after the fact. During, yes, but after the fact began. But there were so many Europeans dead. The lost generation is known because there was kids. There was no men in Europe to reproduce, literally, after the First World War. The lost generation. It was not only because of the poets. I made a program on that, so you should watch it. 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, the World War II. Total United States service members worldwide, it was 16,112,566 U.S. service members worldwide from 1941 to 1945. All right. Battle deaths, 291,557 soldiers died. Other deaths in service, 113,842 dead. Not mortal wounding, 670,146, and living veterans, 389,000. But let's go to the Korean War. 5,720,000 people were servicemen from the United States from the war since 1950 to 1953. Vital deaths, 33,000. I can go. This is unavoidable. The Vietnam War from 1964 to 1975. Total United States service members worldwide, according to the Department of Veterans Affairs, 8,744,000. Deployed to Southeast Asia, 3,403,000. Vital deaths, 47,434. There's numbers that vary, but for other sources. But this is Department of Veteran Affairs. All right. So vital deaths, 47,434. Other deaths in theater, 10,786. Other deaths in service, no theater, 32,000. Living veterans, 6,262,000. Desert Shield, where Colonel Douglas McGregor served at the Desert Shield. Total United States service members, 2,225,000 deployed to the Gulf, 694,550. Vital deaths, 148, very low. Other deaths, 235. Other deaths in service, 1,565. That includes accidents, suicides, etc., etc. Global War on Terror, where all of these began in the 21st century. Global War on Terror, October 2001, September 2021. The Global War on Terror, including Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, were ongoing conflicts. The Global War on Terror ended September 11, 2022, the 20th anniversary of the attacks, 2021. I correct, the Global War on Terror, GWPT, ended September 11, 2021, 20 years later, the 20th anniversary of the attacks. For the most current statistics, visit the following Department of Defense website. But you know that this is secret, and lots of that operations are not disclosed in public. Now, United States veterans and dependents on benefits rolls as of November 2023. Okay. American Revolution, Mexican War, you can cite this. But what I'm trying to say and tell you guys is that the numbers are staggering. And that we need to understand is that, as I told you in the last program, the Canadian government is going to start recruiting Canadians in order to go and die for Nancy Pelosi, in going to die for Kamala Harris, Bad Karma Harris, as I call it, for Genocide Joe, for Donald Trump, for the interests of corporations as Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, to keep on doing to us, the country and the world, what they have done, not only since the pandemic, but since 1492. And when Canada has numbers and responsibility on these matters, I'm sorry, but I understand that the necessity of Canadians to revolt to this system that is guided by the United States. It's time for Canada to say we have participated in World War I, World War II. I'm done. This is an unjustified cause. You're killing innocent people, according to the Lancet, which is one of the most important, if not the most important and respected medical review when it comes to magazines, medical magazines, have stated that there's more than 160,000 dead people in Palestine. I agree with that from the beginning, especially if you start bombarding hospitals, people's places, etc. And now, 10 months after what this irresponsible army being worshipped in Congress last time, Benjamin Netanyahu, a war criminal and genocide dictator, has done with the Palestinians, and the fact that the G7 is mad because Japan didn't invite Israel to come to their celebration, I mean the remembrance of the abuse of the United States by dropping two bombs, the 6th of August and the 9th of August in 1945, unnecessarily, totally unnecessarily, and then trying to cover up the real results of the devastation that they caused in Japan, is something that have literally destabilized me over the years because I love Japan. Everybody loved Japan when I was growing up and hearing the stories of their courage and the samurais and all this tradition that Japan has. Now to have I don't know how many bases, and one of the many, if not most, of course, Germany still has the lead, more than 30,000 American troops. But Japan is now far away from these numbers. And the people of Japan have always opposed the presence of the American military bases in Japan for many reasons, including the unnecessary bombardment of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And now, because of the crisis that we saw, the economic crisis that is disbalancing the economy in the world that began in Japan, the Japanese military and the government apparently is having a glimpse of reality and is saying and waking up and saying, "Hey, we got humiliated by the United States. It was the United States who dropped two bombs on us and killed hundreds of thousands of people. It was the United States who diminished us in the world trade, economics, etc. If it wasn't for ourselves, because we have to remember that Japan is one of those elements that Henry Kissinger hated the most, because after the submission, they were implacable submission, they were submitted, regarding of the redundance of the words, to by the United States was superb. The humiliation of the people of Japan and samurai class, I mean the honor class that believed in the tradition and the principles of honor, respect, etc., that characterizes Japan so much for centuries, has been obliterated by the imposition of the American customs and the American will. Apparently, after the economic meltdown that is happening in the last week, because of the Japan Wall Street, is spreading around the world, and not considering only that Japan has to recuperate its honor. And I will agree, if Japan turns its back on America and becomes a BRICS country, that'll be a more understandable thing. I might be heading up too much now, but Japan is recovering their honor. And unlike Henry Kissinger, where he said we don't want another Japan south of the border when he was speaking about Mexico, because Mexico wanted to nationalize their oil and their industries and their resources. It was a no-no for Henry Kissinger during his time as advisor for the United States different presidents, even though many times behind closed doors or behind the curtain. So Japan needs to recuperate its honor and its duty to its people. And I will appreciate if they start doing it right now. Now, we have to understand that after the attacks in Kursk, in Russia, inside Russia, and the taking over of the metric system that can deliver gas to the Europeans, the Ukrainians are looking for other ways to extort the Europeans and the Americans, who have gave them 170 billion, just the Americans, 170 billion dollars. And BlackRock has invested billions of dollars, $2 billion on a $500 million loan. And those territories that were supposed to produce grain, because we all know that Ukraine produces very good quality grain, it has a very fertile grounds and soil to produce enormous amounts of grain of every cask, corn, lentils, you name it, whatever grain we can produce in the world. Ukraine is one of those. It was promised to BlackRock, but guess who has that territory now? The Russians. And the Russians are not going to go half in half with the BlackRock interests. And BlackRock interests are asking to Ukraine to start paying the bills. And Ukraine is saying, I'm sorry, we don't have the money. And that money we're asking to be reduced to 60% of the loan. So if you give us $500 million and we promise you $2 billion as a guarantor for your investment, we are not going to be able to give you not the $2 billion that we promised you, nor the $500 million or interest, but we can give you 60% less of that. And now that that doesn't work, they're closing the pipelines that come from Russia through Ukraine to Europe, and they're obviously blackmailing Europeans in order to say, okay, we're going to close this in November or right now that we have it, and you're going to have to pay us your gas at our rate. So as you can see, Ukraine, the country that was helped by Europeans, has become a rogue country against the Europeans. Not to mention what they do with the mercenaries they hire. In many cases, yes, they pay their bills, but in many other cases, they humiliate them. In the case of Central and South American awesome warriors and mercenaries, I don't defend mercenaries here, but I agree sometimes with Machiavelli when he said they're not trustworthy, etc. Especially Ukraine is proving that big time. But the point that they take Americans, Colombian, South American soldiers, and they mistreat them and send them to suicidal missions to which they know they're not going to come back. So when they refuse to do that, they isolate them, they torture them, beat them up, put them a bag on their face, eyes blind, handcuffed behind with plastic or handcuffs, and put it in a corner forever without water or food. Do you know what the commandos from Colombia did? Serving in the Ukrainian army, for the Ukrainian army, defending the Ukrainian cause, they said, fuck these motherfuckers, they're going to treat us like this? I don't think so. So they went with weapons, with the Ukrainian flag on their uniforms, fighting Russians to rescue their own members that were situated and isolated in these forms just because the Ukrainians believed because they're blue-eyed and white, they can treat mercenaries that come from other countries to help them like crap. In many cases, seize their passports and don't pay them as they promised. And the other part is that their families never get the bodies of the people that have been killed or disappeared in the front. That's how Ukrainians treat mercenaries that you can imagine, even though the theater of operations in Central and South America is different than the theater of operations, or the reality, in other words, of the war in between the special operation of Russia and Ukraine in the different zones like Donetsk, Luhansk, and the other territories that have been appropriated by the Russians over the war. So as you can see, we have spoke a lot of important issues today, and I hope that you like what I'm getting into. So to resume, I'll say, Canada, we have to wake up and we have to demand more responsibility and accountability. And of course, to the Supreme Court in Canada to consider how Canada is interfering and intervening into other countries' affairs without our permission or consultation. And if they say that they represent us, I am not for the war against Palestine. I will never support a dime for what Canada is doing, but the ministries and the ministers, the Prime Minister and Mrs. Chrystia Freeland and the Ministry of Liberal Party and the next party in Canada are not representing us, the country and the world whatsoever in the will of Canadians to separate from this war. Now, the other thing that I'm going to finish with is how influential is the Jewish committee, the AIPAC in Canada, the equivalence of AIPAC in Canada, the ADL, and all these organisms that exist also in Canada. How influential are they in our universities, in our institutions? Because if it's like with the pandemic, then the corruption is way too high, and we need to find out not only why, but who is responsible in every province, in every ministry, in every responsibility that has taken over our universities and has dismissed so many important doctors and scientific development here in Canada since the pandemic began, and now politically as new elections approach on 2025. Vote for me on this address, signed. Make sure that you have a telephone number or an email that you can be reached at, and support my channel and support me as a Prime Minister of Canada. And we're going to make sure that our allies are going to be protected, but we're going to have to protect Canada first. Period. That's my proposal, and I have many other proposals like evolving economy. For us, for the country, for the world, hope to see you next time in the next edition of React Today as part of the World's Whale Project. Au revoir. Bye-bye. Hasta pronto.